The first time the dog stepped between them, David thought nothing of it. Dogs did that. They wanted to be close to everything, part of everything, in the middle of everything. He reached past Ajax and picked up the baby. Ajax moved with him. His body followed the baby's position the way a compass needle follows north. Not aggressive, not loud, just precise and constant and utterly without apology. By the third day, David was paying attention. "He keeps doing this thing," he told his wife, Rachel. "Every time I try to pick up Mia, he gets in between us." Rachel watched it happen that afternoon. David reached for the baby. Ajax moved. Not threatening, not growling, just positioning his body as the required intermediary between the man's hands and the child. "He's not doing it with me," Rachel said. David looked at her. "He lets me pick her up. He's only doing it with you." This was not a comfortable observation. David was not a man who had trouble with his dog. Ajax was 5 years old and had been with him since before the marriage, before the house, before any of the things that make a man feel anchored to his life. They had an understanding. They had run together and worked together and been alone in hotel rooms together during the long stretches of travel that David's work required. The idea that Ajax had decided something about him, had made some assessment and acted on it, was deeply unsettling. He called the vet. The vet came on a Saturday and watched Ajax for 30 minutes. She watched the way he moved when David picked up Mia. She watched the positioning, the deliberate placement of his body between David's hands and the baby. "He's not seeing you as a threat," she said. David waited. "He's seeing the baby as needing a barrier between her and something you're carrying. Something about you right now is registering differently to him than it normally would." She asked David to describe the past week, his sleep, his diet, his stress levels. He described a work project at its peak. 4 nights of 4 hours or less of sleep. Meals skipped. A level of chronic physical depletion that had become the background noise of his days. "When did he start the blocking behavior?" the vet asked. David thought, "Day 2, maybe. Day 3. Have you had your blood pressure checked recently?" He hadn't. He went that afternoon. The reading made the pharmacist ask him to sit down before she gave him the result. His blood pressure was in a range that the cardiologist who called that evening described as requiring immediate intervention. "Not tonight's emergency," the cardiologist said, "but this week's emergency. Not a discussion for next month." David sat at the kitchen table with the phone in his hand for a while after the call ended. Ajax had already come to sit beside him. He put his chin on David's knee and looked up at him with the particular directness of a dog who has been carrying information for several days and is relieved that the information has finally been received by the correct party. "You've been trying to keep her away from me," David said. Ajax did not respond because he was a dog, but David understood finally what the blocking had been. Not protection from him, protection of her from what he was carrying. Something chemical. Something in the body chemistry of a man running on cortisol and insufficient sleep and a cardiovascular system that was under more strain than anyone had measured. Dogs can smell cortisol. They can smell the compounds that shift when blood pressure changes chronically. Whether Ajax had known any of this in the conceptual sense was not the point. He had acted on it precisely. The cardiologist put David on medication. The sleep improved. The project ended. By the 3rd week, Ajax stopped blocking. He still stayed close when David picked up Mia, but the positioning had changed. No longer between, but alongside. Not a barrier, a presence. David noticed the difference and thought about what it meant. He thought about what it meant that his body had returned to something Ajax recognized as acceptable proximity to the baby. He thought about the days he had spent watching the dog's behavior and attributing it to jealousy, to territorial adjustment, to the normal disruption that a new baby brings to a household's ecology. He had not once considered that the dog was tracking him, that the dog had read something in his body chemistry that the pharmacist would eventually confirm with a cuff and a number, that the baby had been sleeping safely on the other side of a golden retriever's body for the precise duration that she needed to. Rachel put the photograph of Ajax stepping between David and the baby on the refrigerator. She didn't write anything on it. She didn't need to. The story is entirely in the positioning, in the gap between a man's outstretched hands and a sleeping baby. In the dog who stood in it, the family processed it in stages. First, the immediate relief of knowing, of having information where before there had been unease and explanation, and the particular discomfort of watching an animal do something unexplained. Second, the retrospective, the looking back through the days of behavior and reassigning meaning. This moment was not play. It was alert. This moment was not territorial. It was navigation. The rereading happened over dinner, over the drive home from the clinic, in the quiet of the nights that followed. Third, the question that did not have an answer, and that they found they did not need answered. How long had the dog known? Not known, detected, responded to, done the thing. The research existed. They found it in pieces over the following days. Studies on canine olfactory detection of blood glucose. Studies on animal alerting to seizure precursors. Documented cases of dogs identifying respiratory changes, cardiac events, bacterial infections, all before human instruments registered anything wrong. The mechanism in each case was the same. Chemical compounds that shift when physiology changes, compounds that exist in breath and skin, and the microscopic chemistry of a body doing something different than its normal operating state. A dog's nose contains roughly 300 million olfactory receptors.